What if I told you that over a century ago, Sigmund Freud decoded the hidden mechanisms people use to unconsciously mask their true intentions, and that certain phrases rise from the unconscious like warning bells, sentences that should immediately signal you that something is fundamentally wrong here? Picture this scenario. You're having dinner with your partner and the atmosphere feels tense. Then suddenly he utters one of these 6 dangerous phrases. At that precise moment, a psychological defense mechanism activates, deeply rooted in his unconscious mind, a mechanism designed to manipulate, control, or emotionally wound you. Freud discovered that what people say rarely reveals their conscious thoughts, but rather their repressed fears, guilt, and narcissistic injuries. These 6 phrases work like X-rays of the soul, showing you what you're truly dealing with. After watching this video, you'll never again miss it when someone tries to manipulate you using the tools of the unconscious. If you're ready to decode the hidden truths of interpersonal communication, then subscribe to this channel right now. The first warning sign is particularly insidious because it sounds like frustration but represents pure manipulation. The initial red flag manifests in a phrase that seems harmless, yet constitutes one of the most dangerous forms of psychological manipulation. You just don't get me. Imagine this. You're having a discussion with your partner about something important, perhaps finances, quality time together, or his reaction to something you said. You present your perspective calmly, factually, with genuine desire to find a solution. But instead of addressing your points, he shakes his head and says with a tone of resignation, "You just don't get me." Freud would immediately recognize this as a classic case of projection, projection being one of the most fundamental defense mechanisms of the human psyche. It works like this. Instead of acknowledging his own inability to communicate, self-reflect, or open up emotionally, the speaker projects this inability onto you, making you the problem when the real problem lies within himself. What actually happens when a man says this phrase is the following. He's either unwilling or unable to clearly articulate his own thoughts and feelings. Perhaps he hasn't understood what's happening inside him. Maybe he fears the emotional intimacy that genuine communication requires. Or he's simply too proud to admit he might be wrong. But instead of saying, "I don't know how to explain this," or "I need time to think about my feelings," he flips the script. Suddenly, you become the one who doesn't understand, as if understanding were a burden that only you must bear, while he remains passive, expecting you to read his mind. Freud recognized that such projections often happen unconsciously. The man saying, "You don't get me," might not even realize he's transferring his own communication problems onto you, but that doesn't make the manipulation any less real or harmful. The insidious nature of this phrase lies in how it puts you in an impossible position. You're automatically pushed to try even harder to understand him. You ask questions, you listen, you make more effort while he continues in his passive stance, expecting you to do all the emotional labor. Simultaneously, the phrase implies that you're deficient, that you're not empathetic enough, intelligent enough, or loving enough to understand him. It's a subtle but effective form of gaslighting, making you doubt your own perception and communication skills. From a psychoanalytic perspective, this phrase often reveals a deeper narcissistic structure. People with narcissistic tendencies frequently feel they're so unique and complex that others couldn't possibly understand them. This belief protects their fragile ego from the possibility of genuine intimacy and genuine criticism. When you hear this phrase, ask yourself, is the problem really with you, or is your partner refusing to take responsibility for clear communication? An emotionally mature person would say, "Let me try to explain this differently," or "I realize I'm not expressing myself clearly, give me a moment." Have you ever noticed that after such conversations, you felt like you needed to give even more, be even more understanding? That's no coincidence. It's the result of skillful, though often unconscious manipulation. Yet this first phrase is only the beginning. The second warning sentence is even more dangerous because it pits you against all other women while activating a psychological pattern Freud described as splitting. The second warning signal often arrives disguised as a compliment, but reveals itself upon closer examination as one of the most cleverly masked manipulation techniques. All other women are different, but you're special. Picture this scene. You've been in a relationship for several months. One evening, perhaps after a romantic dinner, he looks deeply into your eyes and says with a smile, "You know, all the other women I've been with were shallow, complicated, exhausting. But you're different. You really understand me." In that moment, you feel flattered, chosen, special. You think, finally, someone who recognizes my uniqueness. But Freud would immediately recognize a dangerous psychodynamic at work here: splitting. Splitting is a primitive defense mechanism where reality gets divided into completely good and completely bad. People who use this mechanism are incapable of perceiving others as complex beings with both positive and negative qualities. What this phrase really means is terrifying. He divides the world of women into two camps. On one side stand all his ex-partners, who get blanket labeled as problematic, difficult, or inferior. On the other side stand you, the perfect, understanding, uncomplicated woman. This idealization sounds wonderful initially, but it's a red flag of the highest order. Why? Because an emotionally healthy man would be able to say, "My previous relationships had their ups and downs, but something feels different with you." He wouldn't need to demonize his ex-partners to elevate you. He would understand that past relationships involved complex dynamics that both partners contributed to. But a man prone to splitting cannot process this complexity. He needs clear categories: good versus bad, perfect versus terrible, and here lies the trap. If you're currently on the good side, that doesn't mean you'll stay there. As soon as you become human, as soon as you express needs, set boundaries, or disagree with him, you can very quickly slide to the bad side. Freud recognized that people with this splitting tendency often have disturbed object relations. They cannot perceive others as whole, complex persons, but only as projection screens for their own inner conflicts. When he says, "All other women are different," he's projecting his own unprocessed relationship problems onto his ex-partners. The insidious aspect of this statement is that it puts enormous pressure on you. You must now be the perfect woman, the one who isn't like all the others. That means no bad days, no complicated feelings, no demands. You must fulfill the ideal image he has of you, or else you'll land in the same category as his predecessors. Psychoanalytically speaking, this phrase also reveals deep immaturity and personality development. People who talk this way have often never learned to take responsibility for their relationship failures. Instead, it's always the other person's fault. They were too complicated, too demanding, or too emotional. A particularly alarming element of this phrase is the implicit message about his view of women. If all his previous partners were problematic, the question arises, how does he fundamentally see women? The answer is often sobering, as potentially problematic beings who could disturb his peace. When you hear this phrase, pay attention. Ask yourself, how does he talk about his ex-partners? Can he acknowledge their positive qualities? Can he reflect on his own contributions to past relationship failures? An emotionally mature man would say, "My past relationships taught me a lot, and I value what I'm building with you." The danger lies in the fact that once you fall from this pedestal, and you will because nobody is perfect, you'll be judged with the same harshness as his predecessors. You'll become the new, complicated ex, while he tells another woman how different she is. Have you ever felt like you had to play a role in a relationship, the role of the perfect, uncomplicated partner? Yet, as manipulative as this second phrase is, the third is even more insidious because it directly targets your perception of reality and makes you doubt your own memory. The third warning signal is perhaps the most dangerous of all because it attacks your reality. "I never said that." Picture this. Last night you had an important discussion. He said something hurtful about your family or criticized you in a way that deeply affected you. His words burned into your memory. Today, you address him about it, calmly and factually. But instead of reflecting or apologizing, he looks at you completely perplexed and says, "I never said that. You're remembering it wrong." Freud would see two powerful psychological mechanisms at work here: repression and projection. Repression means the unconscious banishes unpleasant truths from awareness. The man represses not only his hurtful words, but also the guilt and shame associated with them. What's really happening is frightening. He cannot bear that he hurt you. This realization would threaten his self-image as a good partner, so his unconscious activates a protective mechanism. He simply erases the memory from his consciousness. For him, it's as if the situation never happened. But that's not all. By saying, "You're remembering it wrong," he makes you the problem. Suddenly you're the one with the defective memory, with the false perception. He projects his own reality denial onto you. The insidious part is that you start doubting yourself. Did I really hear that? Was I too emotional? Am I remembering incorrectly? These self-doubts are intentional. They keep you from insisting on your justified hurt feelings. Freud recognized that people with weak ego structures are often unable to take responsibility for their actions. Instead, they split off unpleasant aspects of their behavior and project the blame onto others. An emotionally healthy person would say, "I remember it differently, but if you felt hurt, I'm sorry. Let's talk about it." He would take your feelings seriously, even if his memory differs. But a person prone to repression cannot carry this responsibility. He must deny reality to protect his fragile self-image. In doing so, he makes you the crazy one, the oversensitive one, the person with the wrong memories. When you hear this phrase, trust your memory. Healthy communication doesn't mean both partners remember every detail identically, but it means both respect the other's feelings. Have you ever doubted your own memory after a conversation, even though you were completely certain? The fourth phrase is particularly insidious because it labels your emotional reactions as pathological while using one of the subtlest forms of gaslighting. The fourth warning signal disguises itself as factual observation, but represents a direct attack on your emotional integrity. You're too sensitive. Picture this. He said or did something hurtful. Perhaps he embarrassed you in front of others, ignored your feelings, or forgot an important appointment. You address him about it not accusingly, but from an honest desire for him to understand your hurt. His reaction, an annoyed sigh and the words, "You're just too sensitive. Normal people wouldn't make such a big deal out of this." Freud would recognize this as an insidious form of projection and defense. The man projects his own emotional immaturity onto you by labeling your completely normal emotional reaction as pathological, simultaneously protecting himself from uncomfortable confrontation with his own behavior. What's really happening is this. He cannot bear that his behavior hurt you. This realization would mean he'd have to take responsibility and change. Instead, his unconscious activates a defense mechanism. He makes you the problem. By saying, "You're too sensitive," he accomplishes several things simultaneously. He invalidates your feelings, makes you the exaggerator, and establishes himself as the normal, rational partner. Suddenly, it's not his actions that are the problem, but your excessive reactions to them. The insidious nature of this phrase is that it exploits a societal vulnerability. Women are often accused of being too emotional. By using this accusation, he hits a sore spot and makes you question your own legitimate feelings. Freud recognized that people with narcissistic tendencies are often unable to show empathy. They cannot understand or accept that their actions hurt others. Instead, they pathologize their partner's emotional reactions. An emotionally healthy man would say, "I'm sorry that hurt you, that wasn't my intention. Let's talk about it." He would respect your sensitivity as part of your personality, not treat it as a defect. But a man prone to emotional defense cannot take this responsibility. He must minimize your feelings to protect himself. In doing so, he completely overlooks that sensitivity is a strength. It enables deep connections and genuine intimacy. When you hear this phrase, trust your feelings, your emotional reactions are valid and deserve respect, not pathologization. Have you ever felt like you had to suppress your natural emotional reactions to be considered normal? The fifth phrase reveals an even darker side of his psyche, showing how he completely projects responsibility for failed relationships onto others. The fifth warning signal often comes across casually, but reveals a frightening inability for self-reflection. My ex was crazy. Imagine this. You've been together for some time, and the conversation turns to his past relationships. Perhaps you mention one of your exes neutrally or even positively. His reaction, however, is completely different. He grimaces and says, "My ex was completely crazy. She had massive psychological problems. I'm glad I got out of that." Freud would recognize this as a classic case of guilt externalization, a mechanism where all problems of a failed relationship get projected onto the other person. This externalization serves to maintain one's self-image as innocent and problem-free. What's really happening is this. He's unable to recognize or acknowledge his own contributions to the relationship's failure. Every relationship is a complex dynamic between two people. But for him, this complexity doesn't exist. There's only one simple explanation. The other person was crazy. And the insidious aspect of this pattern is that it runs through his entire life. If all his ex-partners were crazy, a disturbing question arises. Either he has incredible bad luck in partner selection, or he's unable to build and maintain healthy relationship dynamics. Freud recognized that people with immature personality structures often tend toward demonization. They cannot see their ex-partners as complex people with both positive and negative qualities. Instead, they become monsters, crazy people, unaccountable beings. Psychoanalytically speaking, this phrase also reveals a deep fear of genuine intimacy. When he labels his ex-partners as crazy, he doesn't have to deal with the painful aspects of failed love. He doesn't have to reflect on what went wrong or how he could have behaved differently. An emotionally mature man would say, "My last relationship was difficult. We both made mistakes, and I learned a lot from it." He would take responsibility and show that he grew from his experiences. But a man prone to externalization cannot do this emotional work. He needs scapegoats to protect his fragile self-image. In doing so, he completely overlooks that this attitude makes him unable to learn from his mistakes. The greatest danger for you lies in the fact that one day you'll be the new crazy ex. When this relationship fails, he'll tell the next woman how crazy you were. Have you ever noticed someone speaking exclusively negatively about all their ex-partners? The sixth and final phrase is perhaps the most manipulative of all, transforming his deficits into your obligations. The sixth and most dangerous warning signal reveals the core of narcissistic manipulation. You should be grateful. Picture this scenario. You've expressed a legitimate concern. Maybe you want more quality time together, more attention, or simply for him to keep his promises. Instead of addressing your needs, he looks at you indignantly and says, "You should be grateful to have someone like me. Other women would be happy with what I offer you." Freud would recognize this as the perfect display of narcissistic injury. The man cannot tolerate you making demands on him. In his perception, you should feel lucky to have his attention at all. Your needs aren't legitimate. They're ingratitude. What's truly happening is shocking. He flips the entire relationship dynamic. Instead of a relationship being mutual exchange of love, respect, and attention, it becomes a favor he's doing you. You get degraded from equal partner to supplicant. This statement reveals a profoundly disturbed understanding of love and partnership. For him, the relationship isn't a place of mutual growth, but a hierarchy where he stands on top, and you should be grateful for whatever he grants you. Freud recognized that people with narcissistic structures often have a grandiose self-image that constantly needs external validation. When you voice criticism or have needs, it threatens their fantasy of personal perfection, so you must be the problem. You're ungrateful, demanding, spoiled. The insidious nature of this phrase is that it diminishes you. It implies you don't deserve what others would consider normal expectations. It makes you believe you should be satisfied with less because you're not worth getting more. Psychoanalytically speaking, this statement also shows fundamental immaturity in object relations. He cannot perceive you as an independent person with legitimate needs. You exist only to boost his ego and confirm his greatness. An emotionally healthy man would say, "I hear that you want more. Let's see how we can solve this together." He would acknowledge your needs as legitimate and jointly seek solutions. But a man with narcissistic tendencies cannot tolerate this equality. He needs the hierarchy, where you're the grateful one and he's the benefactor. When you hear this phrase, recognize the manipulation. You deserve a relationship between equals, not one where you must be grateful for basic human needs. Have you ever felt like you had to be grateful for someone loving you instead of experiencing that love as natural? These 6 phrases are warning signals from the unconscious, signals that show you who you're really dealing with. Each of these phrases reveals a deeper inability, the inability for self-reflection, empathy, emotional maturity, and equal love. When you recognize these warning signals, you gain something invaluable. The power of conscious choice. You no longer have to remain unconsciously entangled in destructive dynamics. You can choose. What hidden truth about your own relationships could change your life if you finally acknowledged it? Tell me in the comments which country you're watching from. I'm excited about our international community.